Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to
Morning,
the
everyone.
G.I.JOE 3D printing podcast. It is July 15th, 2023. This is our first show post Joe Fest and a couple other shows. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about kind of different styles of design, and our guest is Mr. George Waldron. Bring him in. Good morning.
Hey.
Good
morning, everybody.
Morning, George.
George reached out to me a couple months ago. We had both been working on ASPs kind of simultaneously, and both kind of had different approaches to it. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit. But George, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm George. I've been 3D modeling for, Lord, I started as a hobby close to 21 years ago now, give or take. Decided I wanted to do it in some way or another. Originally, I started out with visual effects. Spent several years making tutorials for various web pages, teaching people how to use Maya, and kind of did it as a side gig. Never really did it full time. And then in 2000 and I don't remember if it was 2010 or 2011. You guys have to forgive me there, but one of those 2 years, I found myself unemployed and without any real options ahead of me. And I did what any responsible man would do, and I spent my last $200 going to a trade show. But I don't know why. I really don't. It's completely and utterly out of character for me to have done that. But I did it, and I met a couple of people who produce model kits. And at that point in time, rapid prototyping was something that nobody really knew about outside of industry professionals. It had just started being used in model kit production and garage kit production within like the year prior to me getting into it. And when a couple of people found out I was a 3D modeler, they said, "Do you know what rapid prototyping is?" And I said, "Yes." That was a bald-faced lie, but I did tell them yes. And they said, "Well, I have work for you." And I said, "Thank you, Jesus." And went back home and gave them a week or so to recover from the show. You know how that goes, I'm sure. And got in touch with the two gentlemen that said they had work for me after having taught myself all about rapid prototyping as much as you can in a week. And been doing it ever since. I did have like a 5-year spell where I got stuck in a factory working 90 hours a week. Not much happened in my shop during those 5 years, but I never have actually stopped designing. I will say now my main bread and butter comes from casting more than design work. I anticipate that I don't remember the name of the diagram, but you have basically an X in the middle of it where two different paths cross over, and one's going to cease being productive and the other one will become more productive. I anticipate over the next decade that casting will slowly stop being my main bread and butter, and digital releases and 3D printing is going to become my main bread and butter. And I figure within the next 15 years that even 3D printing is going to give way to strictly digital releases. It's just the trends I've seen and how they're developing in the model kit world. And model kit world's been developing in the miniature world's been, from what I can tell, has been developing the 3D printer stuff a lot longer than the G.I.JOE world has.
Oh yeah, that's where I got into it as well as tabletop gaming.
Yep. And so you might have actually seen some of the progression already in the tabletop gaming world, where, what was it, 6 years ago when Anycubic released their Photon, the first widely available 3D printer, if I remember correctly. This was during the factory period, so
I would say resin, the first widely available
Resin.
Yeah.
You have to forgive me. I don't think of FDM printers so much as printing finished parts, because everything that I've done prior to the G.I.JOE world, if I had printed off a part in an FDM printer to send to one of my clients as a final pattern piece, they would have never worked with me again. So to me, I'm still getting used to the idea of people being okay with a part straight off of an FDM printer as a final part. So yeah, you'll have to forgive me if I don't think.
Well, they've come a long way, and like some folks like Mike here, like Mike's got his machine dialed in, and he'll post pics on like in Instagram, and because it's Instagram and because he's printing something the size of a quarter, he's zoomed in a lot, but like I got to see a bunch of things like in hand at Joe Fest a few weeks ago, and like it just looks so good. Like you can FDM's come a long way.
I don't doubt it. I've seen. I don't remember what group it was on. It may have been a Joe group. It may have been a modeling group. Forgive me. I honestly can't tell you. But somebody printed off like a vertical stabilizer or a wing on a starship or something of that nature. And they said it came off of a FDM printer. I can't remember which one, but I would have swore it came straight off a resin printer.
Yeah. They're coming along.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there were that, and that's like a recent post in the group, and it was some that like the tail fins or stabilizers for one of the G.I. Joe shuttles, and they were black, and they even showed them still sitting on the sleds, and gorgeous prints, gorgeous.
Oh, I scrutinized those photos looking for a build line and couldn't find one. So he's an amazing photographer, or that's an amazing printer.
Or just somebody who's just good at Photoshop. I don't know.
I guess it's possible, but
just that.
You know what? If you're able to put out photos that you like and use a little bit of Photoshop and they look that good, more power to you. I'll take it. If you're happy with it, that's what it's all about in the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have
here? That was Stonegate Creations. Those.
Yeah,
he was using an X1 carbon.
Yep.
X1 carbon.
Yep.
Yeah. He doesn't say what kind of filament he used, does he?
Let's see. Printed in black. Just PLA plus.
PLA plus, and that's so the machine is doing wonders.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what layer.
What layer heights, all that, but
yeah.
The machine looks
or something.
The machine looks like it's pretty good.
It's doing God work. So George, I do want to before we get too much into anything else, we were going to do like a compare and contrast with the two asps. Do you have one? Do you physically have one? I know you've got the base for one sitting there.
So I've got most of one. There's a few pieces I haven't gotten around to printing off. I'm in the middle of doing a big commission print for a client with some just paint sculptures and stuff he wanted to print it off. So my printer's been tied up. All of them have been tied up with that for a while.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of this was actually printed by Sean Cho.
Mm-hmm.
I've been so busy with my own printers that I haven't been able to do my own test printing lately. But I printed the main body of this on my Saturn II.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to reprint it. It's it had a few failures in it. Down in there's a big crack in the bottom and a few other issues with it. I could fix it, but right up in here, it didn't print straight. It kind of bowed, you can tell.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That, but at this point, it'd be quicker and easier and cheaper for me just to reprint it. So
yeah,
I'll end up reprinting the back half. Front half is actually in good shape, so I'm gonna keep using it. I designed it actually. I pulled the whole seat section out of it so that if somebody wanted to print this in FDM, they'd easily be able to flip it over upside down and put as much of their support in this invisible area as possible.
Yeah.
Same deal with this. If you want to print this on an FDM, you can, and all of your supports will go on the bottom where you can knock it off and preserve your details. And all of the switch panels and stuff are separate, so you can print them in a resin printer if you've got access to one. So I tried to make it as friendly as I could for everything. The body and the chassis are the two largest pieces. Split up to fit on anything under 300 millimeters. So pretty much everybody should have access. There's one of the outriggers that I designed for the front. Just kind of pieced together.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that awesome?
I can't really say where the feet came from, but some people might recognize the base structure for the feet. Um, Sorry about my camera. There's no auto zoom or auto.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Um, yeah, these I couldn't in good conscience not do something if I was going to put all the other work into the detail in the cockpit and whatnot. I had to update these outriggers. And there's actually in the back there's a third one. I'm not going to take the time to unpin this thing, but just imagine this hole and this hole is a pivot point, and it'll
Mhm.
slide up in there and it'll nestle nice and neat into the back of the chassis and stay and hold in place with friction.
That's cool.
Nice.
Assuming the printer that prints it off is dialed in well enough, it'll sit in place with friction.
Nice.
The top of the chassis, I've split into 3 different plates. There's a third one I'm not holding, obviously, but it basically just slips down into the top of the chassis to cover up all the FDM. That way, you don't really have to worry about finishing very much of it if you don't want to. There's lots of little plant-on detail pieces. Another creator, another one of the makers in the G.I.JOE world, and we've been talking with each other, trying to find a proper happy medium, because the world that I'm used to, you want to put as much of this little stuff right here in it as you can. And the world that I'm playing in right now, you don't necessarily need or want all of that. Yeah, it looks great, but only about 10% of the people, my target customers, would actually want that kind of detailing.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to find the happy medium and where to go. My next release that I've only posted about it once, that drone setup, called it the Oasis.
I do have a picture of that if you want me to put it up.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Is it from the files I sent you earlier, or is it from the the group?
It was a picture you sent me via chat, via Messenger.
Okay. But,
I think I've got it.
if you, I think I might have still gone a little overboard on the detailing, but at the same time, it's going to be. I think it'll be a good product.
So I've got the case here. Let me put that up.
Let me get my other browser. Yeah.
Holy moly.
So if we're looking at this one, the final product, that whole large switch plate, I'm pointing at my screen, why? The whole large switch plate in the bottom piece, it's going to be the joystick and the 2 throttle pieces will come out of it. They store in a drawer in the bottom that slides in and out. The switch plate will come up to be easily printed on a resin printer, with the body being able to be flipped upside down. It's not going to be support free. It's going to fill the center up with supports, but you can print it almost self-supporting, excepting that. There's also a large hole on the inside of it for a drawer to slide in and out of.
And I
The
have
top
a
of it,
picture of that. I'll try to bring it up.
the top of it, the 2 switch plates come off as well. That screen bezel pulls out so that the screen behind it can be made out of acrylic.
Yeah.
And there's a recess in the back of it with a wiring channel through the lid, down through the main body, and out one corner, so that you can put an LED in behind the screen to illuminate it. And it'll the wire is going to go out to a little small battery box that's set up to hold a 2032 button cell battery holder. So that it'll have a simple switch right here on the battery box, so that you can just pull the top off, flip the switch, illuminate it if you want.
Mm.
It's got a drone in the drawer, UAV. It looks a lot like a Mavic from DJI, but it's got one of those in the drawer. It has separate blades because I couldn't make the blades fit in the drawer attached to it. So they print separately and have a little spot to hold them in the drawer as well. And I'm probably going to set up a couple of drones of varying stages of the arms unfolded or folded, so people can pose their figures, setting it up, unpacking it, packing it, whatever, not just be stuck with folded and unfolded entirely. And considering also maybe developing just a few rudimentary stands that can be printed and clear to hold the drone up over in pictures too. That'd be the last thing that I have to do, other than a few modifications based on feedback from a couple of makers who've looked at it with me. One thing, I'm pointing at my screen again, the bezel. There's that file currently, the STL for it is like 180 megabytes, and it slipped by me. I didn't notice it. One of the other makers did. And it's because I had originally had the resolution at like 10,000 polygons for the whole thing. And at some point in my process, either due to a unknown connected history node somewhere in the back of Maya, or just me clicking on it and not realizing it, I had did another 3-division smooth on it. And so the poly count jumped up to like 3.7 million. I completely overlooked it, didn't notice it. And so I've got to go back and address that issue and correct it, get the new STL file out, things like that. But hopefully I'll be releasing it as a digital release, a raw print, and then a limited set of build-ups if enough people want me to build them up for them. But yeah, I still think I need to tone the detail a little bit farther down from there even. Yeah, there's the drawer with the drone in it. You can see both of the throttles are highlighted. They have a little spot to sit in the drawer. All the blades, individually, those blades are only 10,000ths of an inch thick. So I'll send them out pre-supported for the people that buy the files. Same with the joystick. The joystick is the same one I used in the ASP. I just stripped the details off of it so it's a little bit easier to print. You can look, the drawer has, if you look at the back of it, you'll see slots cut in it so the tabs can fold in. I've actually removed the 2 lips on either end of the back side of the tab so it folds in farther and more properly. But that has a peg on the side that engages in a trench, if you will, inside the drawer slot, so it'll slide in and out, and has a stop on it so you don't pull it all the way out.
So you had sent me actually a video. You have a print of it, and you had sent me a video. And I don't have a way to play it, unfortunately.
Oh, that's
on the stream. But it's like it's an impressive little print. Like it's perfect. It's just small.
Yeah, it'll be super fragile. Unfortunately, this is going to end up being for the people that want to set up a display and leave it on a shelf for 6 months and then maybe repose it 6 months later. Not for the guys that want to get out in the yard and play with their kids.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. You could leave the switch plates out of it and leave the screen out of it and leave the blades in a baggie and take the main box outside and play with it with your kids. It'll be strong enough to do that. But the detail bits, you definitely wouldn't want to. And I want to hit a point where I can get the same implied detail that I currently offer, but do it in a way that at least it's a little bit more rugged. It'll withstand a little bit more play than what currently can. You know?
Yeah. It's definitely a weird balance to try and find something, especially when you're offering files and not just selling a product that you made.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's going to be people printing that have different skill levels, different levels of experience, and then all these different machines and materials, and you want to try and make something as universal as possible. Maybe that's what you want, or maybe like, where you want to live is kind of like this hyper detail, more like selling a model kit than a toy. And like, if you want to commit to that, then you just got to somehow communicate to your customers that like they need to have the level of skill and expertise to pull off the thing that you're selling them. But
Yeah.
that's a weird, that puts you in a weird sticky spot possibly.
It does. How do I come up to one of my customers and say, I'm sorry, you just don't know what you're doing?
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well.
can't do that. But at the same time, it's a conversation that I've had with Sean Cho quite a bit. Just because I'm a professional printer, I handle printing day in, day out, all day long. I print things that most people look at and say are impossible. Those rotor blades, for instance, the few people who had seen them before I printed them didn't think they would ever print. But at the same time, I'm having to, so it's like you said, I'm having to learn where that line is in the sand so that I'm not sending impossible things out to people to beat their head on their desk over because they don't have the reason to have the experience printing out that I've got, or you may have, or whoever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's a line that I'm still trying to find. So, yeah, I'm sure I'll probably get 2 or 3 more products out before I really find that line.
So I've got one of my asps here, and so when I did this, like the original design I thought was pretty close to perfect. Like it didn't really need anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really wanted to add some type of mechanism in there that the pilot, gunner, whatever could grab.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a tough nut to crack, keeping kind of the original shape. Like I definitely dug the cockpit out a bit more to make room for a figure.
Yeah.
But even with that, like unless I go and widen it significantly to put a place for the arms to go grab stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
The now there's one of the comics had an like a close up of the gunner in the cockpit with like a whale coming at him, and he's holding on to like where this view screen is on the cage. He's got 2 like trigger grips that he's hanging onto, and I really wanted to put that on here, but kind of found just like the figures just sort of aren't although they're great figures and they're articulated, like they can't do it. They can't grab it without them just looking real weird. So it ended up getting kind of nixed, unfortunately.
The solution that I came up with, and I don't remember if I put it in the text or not, to be honest with you, the little text file I included with it. I put a half round slot for the joystick to sit in, but the intention is never to actually have it attached to the asp. It's always in the driver's hand, so that when you pose your driver, you just make sure you pose it with the end of the joystick down into that slot at whatever angle he's sitting at.
Yeah.
That was the best solution I could come up with to it. I couldn't think of any way to actually attach it to the asp itself. But this gives the illusion that it's attached and in there. It's posed properly. And you're right. I had to widen it up drastically to get it so he could fit his arms in there.
I was really surprised.
Let's go. That's nice.
It's like I dug an asp out, and I have one. Oh. And there's really just no room inside this thing.
Oh, there isn't. I had I think it was Crazy Legs, I think is the figure that I just happened to have available in that area, that size range, when I was sitting it up in my asp. And he doesn't fit in the cockpit. His toes poke out of the roll cage.
Yeah, I don't think there's a single figure that can fit in that cockpit with the thing down without parts of them
hanging out a little bit.
Out the.
But one thing that was one of the biggest things that I personally wanted to address in this was I wanted the figure to be able to sit fully inside the cockpit.
Yeah.
And even with all of the concessions I made, his toes still barely poke out the top.
Yeah.
And for me to have gotten this thing is already a 2.65, 265% larger than the original Asp was. I tried it at 1.7, and the figure just wasn't fitting in that cockpit at all. I tried it at 1.9, the figure just wasn't fitting in that cockpit at all. I tried it at 2.25, the figure sort of fit in that cockpit, but that's when I decided I need to start dropping the cockpit down into the body, figuring out some new mechanism for the body and the guns to work with.
Yeah, and that was another thing. That was the limiting factor on how much I was willing to drop the seat in the cockpit, was that bar that goes through that connects the two guns. You hit that.
Yep. I beat my head on it for ages, and this was my solution. But the actual final part splits right here, because otherwise you can't get it into that.
Hold on. Let me make you bigger real quick, because I'm not sure what it is you're showing us.
This is basically just a ratcheting style connecting piece. Unfortunately, I can't show you.
But you don't have a bar connecting. You have each one is an individual.
Yep.
Like plug.
Exactly.
There you go. So
it sockets in like that. No, it's intentionally left slightly oversized so that each person, once they get theirs, they can take a little sandpaper to the nubs, and then they can sand it to A, what their printer's tolerances work at, and B, the snugness and fit they personally want. But it just, I haven't got that side fit yet. Sorry. It just ratchets around. I may have the one that isn't fit. I've only got one of them fit right now. But either way, it registers into a set of you can't see them, half rounds on the inside.
Okay.
And I've got, I think it's 20 on the inside of here and 5 on the inside of here that overlap by 1/10 of a millimeter. 1 millimeters.
Okay. How far apart did you set the angles? What are your locking angles?
360 divided by 5 is
So it's all the way around. It's not just like in a firing arc.
No, it's all the way around, so that just so that it doesn't limit the mobility of the guns in any position of the cockpit.
Okay.
I mean, if you get the cockpit down versus up, if you got it limited to a 90-degree position, then you're only got what 20-something degrees of motion in your gun. If it's
the original, and I didn't know this until I started messing with mine. The original had little bumps so that it would ratchet, right? So, and mine's kind of. So it's got 3 positions, and I just copied the way the original had.
Video feeds. You're still in the small in the corner right now.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah. Go ahead and get bigger. There you go.
Yeah. So you can see there's this spacer on either side, and that's part of the base, so that the big piece rotates independently of where the ratchet system is. So whether this comes up or whatever, where the ratchets on this are part of that base piece.
Yeah.
It'll stay.
Yeah,
I got
so it'll stay where.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, they figured it out, like in the early 80s. So I decided not worth messing with it. The weird thing is that because I'm doing this in this the resin doesn't have the give that the old plastic has.
Yeah.
So it's like you gotta, if you want those pieces in tight, you've got to sand those nubs down pretty far, or it's just gonna be stuck. It's weird. It's weird working. When you try and take some of these old designs, the Ferrets and the Skyhawks and the stuff people have done, if you're doing it in resin, there's things that aren't going to work the way they used to work. Like I have a Skyhawk here. I want to say I got it from Wood Tech Armories,
Okay.
And
Yeah.
the way the engines on the old Skyhawk were, there was a bar that connected the two engines, and you kind of snapped it in.
Yep.
You can't do that now because the resin just doesn't have the give.
Doesn't have the give. Yeah. Interesting.
So
have you tried any of that? What is it? F80
F69,
F69. Have you tried that yet?
which is it's like TPU.
Yeah.
I have not had a lot of luck printing with that material.
So I've been waiting until I had an opportunity to purchase a half liter to test out.
Yeah,
So
it's
I would
expensive.
think that this right here might actually print really well in that and work really well using that resin.
Maybe. I found it to be pretty stiff. So I tried to use it for the tires on the Ferret. That was the first thing I was going to try and do with it. And it's because of the size and thickness of them, it was still really hard.
Okay.
And my print kept failing. But I could tell from what did come off the
What it
printer,
felt
like
like.
it was
Right.
hard.
the perfect thing for that, and probably for any of this stuff, but it doesn't do any good for people that don't have shops. Is something like this, and this is a cast resin I can use, tinted to whatever color. And in all honesty, in the end,
I saw that you went to Reynolds.
yeah, I go to well, I've got a couple of clients who live in the Chicago area, and Reynolds is right around the corner for them.
Okay, remember we talked about it.
That's
I
right.
was telling you have to actually go.
What I ended up doing is we talked. I called a client up and I asked him to run by there and talk to him about the flexible resins, and he grabbed a whole handful.
Vitaflex sample for you.
Yeah, a whole handful of these pucks.
Yeah.
And out of all of them, this one's the one that I like the most because it's a plastic, and it's a 2-part portable plastic.
Yeah, it's a polyurethane.
It is identical to rubber in how flexible it is, and you can still take paint, and I can dye it.
It's like most of the Vitaflexes are like that amber color, but that looks pretty white. What is that?
Yeah,
this is a Simpact 60A.
Okay. Yeah.
What
was the cure time on it? That's Vitaflex. I can tell.
Yeah, I honestly haven't dug the numbers up, and
okay.
I haven't got a sample kit yet. But to me, for
these tires are that Vitaflex with some of the So Strong, that dye.
That's dope.
But this is why I pulled this out. That piece right there, the hose. That's
the hose.
Yeah. That's the one thing I have successfully done with that F69.
Okay.
Is this one piece. That's the only thing I've been able to pull off with that stuff.
And so, and that one still looks like it's a little bit more stiff than what.
Yeah,
the tires
it's definitely.
I wonder.
I don't know if I glued it in. No.
Rubbers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I can bend it a bit and it'll go back to shape. But I know if I go too much, I'll break it.
Yeah.
Is there any type of post curing operation like in some resins? I have to get full strength out of them. If I need them to be like super strong, super hard, yeah. After I cast it, you have to like bake it in the oven at a low temperature for 2 or 3 hours. So, is there any type of post operation for that might give you that extra flexibility? Like you see people just crinkling it up, and
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, and I've seen that too. I've seen that done, but it's always been with pretty thin pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trick, is having just the right thickness.
Probably. Most of what I see that F69 used for is things like vests and attack vests and armor, stuff like that. Maybe some guns. That way the bullet, the barrel doesn't break off the tip of your gun if you print it in that F69.
Mm-hmm.
So I do also want to talk Maya a bit.
Yeah.
When I get asked, and we did a panel at Joe Fest a few weeks ago, just kind of like an introduction to the 3D design, 3D printing thing. And what I always tell people is that Maya is a great program, but it's not necessarily the right tool for 3D printing. That yes, you can absolutely make it work, but it's really meant more for special effects. And then when you and I spoke the first time, it made sense that you had come from doing like video and 3D design for that kind of stuff versus manufacturing. So it made sense.
If I could go back and if I knew what I knew 20 years ago, what I know now, I would have been learning SolidWorks, or was Rhino around back then? Rhino, if it was, I would have been learning something of that nature. Um, Maya is a beautiful tool for visual effects. It's great if all you want to do is make a short movie or design a cool model to do some renders of or something like that. It's perfect for that. But in my experience and with my workflow anyway, it takes a sledgehammer to make it work for 3D printing. I've adapted to making it happen, but for instance, we could pull one of the other makers in the G.I.JOE community into the chat, and my sledgehammer with my methods have led to multiple headaches with he and I just working together and pushing through random issues here and there. And it's I know it's because of the fact that I've developed several bad habits in trying to do things as quickly as possible. Through my professional career, I always kept my files. I didn't have to release them. So as long as they put out the end result from the printer they were sent to, it didn't matter what bad habits I picked up along the way. Right. Now that I'm releasing files to public, and it's not just the bad habits aren't just I've contained them in my house and it's no big deal. I'm having a lot of these bad habits are being pointed out to me that are things I never even thought of as bad habits. It was the most efficient way to get the thing done in the scenario that I had in front of me. And Maya it's like beating my head against a wall some days because there's no real easy way to work around some of those bad habits in Maya.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure there is some Maya specific habits you're talking about, but I think for a lot of us that started doing this stuff ourselves in a vacuum, making things for ourselves, like you said, like it didn't matter. Like I was the customer and like I knew how to work through what I had created.
Yep.
But yeah, it's kind of just being with this group and kind of starting to work with and talk to other designers and everything. It makes you realize there's other ways to do things, you know. And that's one of the things I've really liked about the group is like not being in a vacuum anymore.
Oh, you're completely right about that. I would say that I've probably learned more from the one creator that I generally speak to more when I'm in the development process than anybody else. I don't know if he wants me giving his name out. Sorry, I have no idea if he wants that or not. So it's the reason I'm not saying who it is. But nonetheless, I think I've learned more from him over the last several months of working with him to finish my projects off and get feedback from him than I had in the previous 5 years of, whatever problem I needed to solve, I solved it. But I just used, like I said, the proverbial sledgehammer to get it done because that's what put money in the quickest. And so, yeah, it's been very enlightening to me to get the feedback of another professional outside of my shop. I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
That's what the group is about, though. That's dope.
But yeah, I'm sorry I digressed from your original question, but I would not recommend it to anybody who's like thinking about just getting into this. If you're thinking about just getting into it to do 3D printing, go to Blender. If you want to work with polygons, go to Blender. If you want to work with solid objects, NURB modeling, go to Fusion 360. You can get a free trial version of it to learn with. both of those are extremely powerful tools to create things with. Blender, a lot of people don't realize it, but there are a lot of large FX houses that keep Blender on their computers because it's just better at doing things than some of the multi-$1,000 programs are.
Yeah.
And so it's a very, very good program. The sculpting tools in it are very close to what ZBrush offers now.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say you get all of the functionality, but they're very, very close. When you're talking about a difference of $450 a month, I say it's
Close enough, right?
Yeah. Close enough.
And as far as I understand, Blender's actually working NURBS and solid tools into their workflow or their user interface now too.
Yeah, they're starting to add a whole CAD package.
Yeah, so I would.
That's impressive. Not so much impressive, but like that's really handy for beginners.
Or one-stop shop.
Right?
You know.
Jeez. If I could find some place that just offered like an in-person class, and the person teaching knew Blender well enough that they could teach it, like.
What for me, I would love to learn Blender or Rhino, perhaps. I don't really want to learn SolidWorks. It's too hard to work with other programs, at least from my experience. It's not very cross-platform friendly. I could be mistaken. Maybe the people that have used SolidWorks in collaboration with me didn't know what they were doing, or I didn't know what I was doing. It's possible. But in my experience, it just hasn't been very cross-platform friendly. But I would love to have the time to learn Blender or Rhino. It's a very daunting thought process for somebody that's been 20 years with one program specifically. It's extremely daunting because
that's the crutch of it all. It's like once you already know something and you have a workflow and you know how to get something done, going back and just kind of learning from the start it's like crippling in a sense.
Even just like I've had a lot of people lately asking me about the Tinkercad tutorials I used to do, and it's like I couldn't get on Tinkercad right now and do a tutorial for someone because it'd be me reteaching myself as I went. It'd be brutal.
I've tried to sit down when I was recovering from my neck surgery and I had 3 months to do nothing but sit on the couch. I put ZBrush on my wife's laptop. Not that it ran it well, but I had nothing but time, and so I had ZBrush tutorials on my tablet and my wife's laptop in my hand, and my drawing tablet in my lap. And I'm trying to teach myself ZBrush, and I can't even overwrite the muscle memory that I have for Maya's command. So I'm constantly doing the wrong thing, or it became so frustrating that I just walked away. And I was like, I can put this time into something more productive and less frustrating, and just continue doing what I've been doing. And I know that's not necessarily the right answer, but man, it's just so hard to teach yourself a new program, especially, like I said, 20 years in.
Right. It's like learning a new language.
It is. It's 100% a new language.
And like, let's say for people, and this is just way off cuff, but the older you get, the more defined you are in one language, the less likely you are to try to really pick up another language. That's why they say infancy is the time to start learning multiple languages. So before you become well versed in Maya, if you were learning Maya, ZBrush, and Blender all at the same time, all at the same launch pad, you wouldn't have as much frustration or problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 10 years ago, I picked up a new program that it changed my workflow dramatically, and it sped my process up drastically. But it took me a year of beating my head in that program before that happened. The only reason I stuck with that program is this was before I had my own 3D printers in house. the print house that I sent the vast majority of my designs to, they just told me, look, you've got to use this program to do these things. You have to. And so that became part of my workflow. And through the years of using that other program and finding out other things it did, I actually started removing operations from Maya and putting them into this other program because they did it 10 times faster with 2 clicks instead of 3 hours of beating my head on the desk. And that in itself introduced new artifacts and issues in the histories and other problems that make it so that working with another individual makes it very difficult. It also makes it difficult to backtrack. I use this other program to do Boolean operations, for instance, because it's quicker to Boolean panel lines out in Maya than it is to actually model them when I need a smooth surface.
Mhm.
So I model my surface and smooth it out. Then I model a negative of my panel lines I want in there, and I Boolean those out. That makes it very difficult if, a week and a half down the road, some new information comes up, like somebody got a new picture of we're talking model kit, for instance, somebody got a new picture behind the scenes of a studio model, and it totally changes the shape of the entire underlying structure of the ship that I'm modeling. I've got to go back and undo 2 weeks or a week worth of work and redo the entire underlying structure, redo the Boolean operation. And so that doesn't happen often, but it has happened. And in that case, it just, those shortcuts that you develop to get things done quicker bite you in the butt. And then, like I said, I could never send that file to another individual and then edit it because it's triangulated. It's dead for editing at that point. You can't do anything but Booleans.
Yeah, it's like duct tape and chicken wire holding the file together. Yeah, exactly. Like Fusion's got a thing where it's got a history, and as long as you've created the entire thing in Fusion, you can go in and every time you click the mouse on to do something, it keeps it in the history. And so you can go to specific edits you've made, and like if you've just done a bevel on a corner 2 weeks ago, you can go click on the model and it should highlight in the history bar any functions you did that affected that piece that you've highlighted. And you can delete it, you can edit it, sort of. Like it depends on how many other things are stacked around that function that you did who knows how many clicks ago. And sometimes you can just, like, the whole model can just unwind because you're trying to change how much you beveled something. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it works perfect. Sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, like, it's just so much work trying to fix.
I've literally never had Maya work when I went to edit history if I've done anything after the edit I was making. It's all there as long as I don't go from one app to another and back to Maya. But in your instance, let's say I've done a bevel. Let's say I've got let's say I'm making a wheel, right? And I've did a bevel around the outside of the wheel, the tires, to give a good beveled edge. I'm coming inside and I'm going to do a couple of extrudes to shape out my wheel rim. Get all that done on the side. I want that bevel to be a little bit rounder. I want to add an extra, 1/8 of an inch to the radius on that bevel. So I do it. The next thing I know, everything that I did for the wheel rim either disappears or it shoots out into space somewhere.
Yeah.
I've got vertices that are 10,000 units away to my left, still attached to my model and dragging the whole mesh between it.
Yeah.
So it's one thing I do in Maya is anytime I begin or end a large sequence of editing, get something where I know I like it, I don't think it's going to need to be changed anymore, I will immediately save a new version of my file. That way, I can go back through, even if I have something where I do have to change the body shape on something, and I've added panel lines in. I can go back and I can get my panel line cage out from a previous version, import it into the new one, put a lattice deformer on it, reshape it quickly so that it fits the new body shape, and then cut it back out. So I always make sure to save multiple versions of everything I'm working on, so that if I have to go back and pick and choose pieces out of old versions to correct issues I found, I can do it.
Mhm.
So I'm pulling up. This is my Aspen
Mhm.
Fusion, and I just want to see if I can pull up the this thing over here. Okay. So can we see this? Yeah.
Yeah.
So where he's talking about versions, every time. Oh, come on. Here we go. Every time you save, because Maya is an Autodesk product just like Fusion is. Every time you save it saves it as a version of the file. So I can go back, all the way to the beginning, wherever in the process, and bring up those old saves, which is pretty cool.
In Maya, that's not an automatically turned on option. The
No?
files, the final file for the ASP is like 4.7 gigabytes. And so if every single time you saved it, it created a new file, and you're saving 4 gigabyte files every time, it would get to be a resource hog. So you either turn it off or turn it on. Um, they also they've got a incremental save thing. You turn it on and it'll save it as version 1.001, 002, etc.
Mhm.
But I don't. I've got like 9 terabytes of storage space, and I can't afford to put that much storage space into it. So I'll I manually change the file name. But
Interesting.
yeah, I just wonder if anybody's working with Maya, just so they don't immediately think that this is a default option. In Maya, you have to go and turn it on. Unless in 2023 or newer, it's default anyway.
So the Infusion, not only is it automatically on, but it saves to the cloud.
Save, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
not to
So
your
like
drive.
if like I've only got a license for one copy of Fusion, but I use it on my primary machine, which is on the other side of the office here.
Mhm.
But if I go home, I have a laptop that I can log into there,
You just
and I
pull it
have
up.
access to everything I've done on the other machine. I have access to it just by logging in. That's nice for me. That works for me.
Oh, if I didn't have everything literally right here in this corner, I'd be the same way. I'd much rather have a deal with it being on the cloud, let somebody else deal with the storage of it for me.
Yeah.
One thing though, another reason I've held on to physical media for so long, though, it goes back to the same thing I mentioned about why this one computer stays offline. I've I've had clients that if I had stored things in the cloud for their job, it would have immediately terminated the contract or violated the contract.
Yeah.
So it's another thing. It's just easier to stick with physical media all around anyway, at least for now. While those type of contract terms are still being used.
Mhm.
I do not miss that.
I don't do it so much anymore, but I mean, even as recently as like 2021, I had a job with EFX doing Star Wars stuff, and it would have violated the contract and NDA with them to have their work stored on the cloud. Um, and it also, considering I get assets from when I do work from them, I get assets from LFL quite often. I can't have that stuff stored on the cloud either. It's got to be stuck on physical media because they're too protective of their assets, and I can't blame them. I mean, they have no way to know that somebody will get the crap off of my computer or get into my account, and all of a sudden the Razor Crest is out in the open.
Right.
I doubt they would want that at all. So, but
All
it's
right. We are coming up on 1 hour. Yeah, so I know we've had a little bit of stuff in the chat, but if anyone's got any specific, like this is a great time to ask some Maya questions if you've got them.
oh yeah.
Well, so I know that some people use Maya and say it works perfectly well for, you know, creating the 3D models for 3D printing. But I don't hear a lot of people saying that, which leads me to believe that there's definitely some sort of firewall to the process. So what can you say are some of the problems you really run into trying to make a 3D model using that program? Like, what's some of the immediate things that you run
You mean
into?
like a print, like a solid printable?
Yes, a printable model.
Well, when I go from Maya to my 3D printing prep program, I'd prefer not to tell you the name of that one.
Mhm.
Um, but it's when I export from Maya and I import into that, it doesn't matter how I can export a cube from Maya, and it's a cube. We got what, 8 vertices, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. Uh,
Mhm.
there's nowhere for me to not know it's solid. If I don't have a floating face, if I don't have a floating vertices somewhere, if I can't pick something in these very few items and separate it, then I know it's solid.
Mhm.
I'll export it into my 3D print prep program, and it'll tell me that it's got 3 non-manifold faces and 2 unwelded edges and 17 vertices, and it's just because of the way Maya exports. It's the only thing I've ever figured out. It
So
doesn't. It was never.
are we talking about an STL or an OBJ or?
Doesn't matter.
Wow.
If I import either STL, OBJ, or FBX into this other program,
Okay.
it will almost every single time give me an identical mesh, no matter what file type I use, with the exact same errors in each one. Every once in a while, I might find a couple of edges that welded in the OBJ to didn't in the FBX or something like that, but it's the only thing I can figure out is just something in Maya's export algorithm. And the STL exporter in Maya was really just shoehorned in like 5 years ago. There were a couple of Mel scripts that you could use to export STLs prior to 2016. Wow, it's more than 5 years. 2016, I believe, is when they first put the exporter in standard with Maya.
Mhm.
But before that, you could get some aftermarket Mel scripts and export STLs, and they'd export beautifully. But I don't know what it was that Autodesk tried to shoehorn into Maya to give it that functionality. It doesn't work well.
Right. Okay.
Um,
That's
there
a big deal because
are
that's
some.
like end of the whole process. You've designed something that you think is beautiful, and then you're trying to get it to the point where you can make it printable, and then it just changes or something. Just period.
And a lot of times, the program that I use to prep things from Maya, and one of the reasons I started using this one of the reasons that printer forced me to start using this one, because they got
Mhm.
tired of getting files and me thinking they were perfect, and then they had to spend another hour going through and just doing automated fixes on it to get it back to where it was when I exported.
Mm.
So that's why I got into using that program, is because it's all simple, for the most part, simple 1 or 2 click fixes. You just click it, say process, and you walk away for 30 minutes while your computer crunches numbers. But it's still, if you don't have that combination of programs, then if you export it to Maya and you send it to Mesh Mixer, I've heard people say Mesh Mixer doesn't see the same stuff. NetFab, I think, is what it used to be called. Some people might know it as that, but yeah, it's always been an issue with Maya. Somebody exporting from 3DS, another Autodesk software, doesn't have anywhere near the number of artifacts coming into it.
Mhm.
Um, it's just I think it's all because Maya is literally built for visual effects, and you can't get any farther from rapid prototyping than visual effects is.
Now, I have issues with Fusion where if I try to bring in, because Fusion is hard surface modeling and vehicles, guns, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if I try to bring in like an organic shape, maybe something I've edited in ZBrush or something, it's got a real hard time dealing with that mesh, and it'll bog the software down. You can, if it's small enough, like less than 10,000 faces, which is not much,
No.
you can create a B-rep out of it and then make it editable, kind of. But it bogs the software down so much. It's rough. And like you were saying, like there's things I can do to it, but it's like hit the button and then walk away.
Yep.
You know, maybe go fuck with the printers for an hour, and that, like, oh my god, that's the worst hour. Like, I don't know, is it gonna crash? Am I wasting my,
I can send you. I could send you pictures. I've sent clients who were saying, "Why in the hell is this file not in my email?" And I would roll around to this computer, grab my cell phone, and take a picture of it processing, and it would say 78% processed in 16 and a half hours.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I'm sitting there just waiting. And like you said, is it going to crash? If
Yeah.
it crashes, that's time wasted. But if you see that progress bar move, even if you go back an hour later and it's 2 hours later, it's only moved 1%, you know it's still working, so you got to let it go.
Yeah. But like, no kidding, that it's the worst thing. I've got a couple of things now where like there's just one or two little parts that, like, they don't look right hard surface modeled. They're just, like a pouch, right? Like a pouch on a backpack. Like, I've got to go, like, to do it right, I've got to put it in ZBrush or some other program and give it like an organic little push,
yeah.
right? Because otherwise it just doesn't look right. And but then I still have to finish it in Fusion because I need to be able to send a factory a step file, and like just even the tiniest little piece, as soon as I bring it in as a mesh and have to convert it, like when it's time to save the file, welcome to waiting 3 hours. And it's just the worst. It's the worst.
Mm.
Yeah.
One thing I do like about the other program that I use for prepping files, if it crashes, it will. Every time you start an operation, it like auto saves the file in a temp program or in your temp folder. And if it crashes, it will pull up the last auto saved file. And that way, if you haven't saved it for like 2 hours of other stuff, you don't lose that 2 hours of work. All you lose is the one operation that it crashed.
That you didn't. Yeah.
So I wish more software actually had a feature like that, because I can't tell you the number of times I've been working in Maya and did something, decided I didn't like it, and, beveled this. I don't really like the way that looks. Control Z, and then Maya crash. Why? Why are you crashing when I'm undoing this? Or I hit smooth, one division smooth on a beveled cube, and for no reason whatsoever that I can never figure out, Maya will crash.
Yeah.
And I've actually had it corrupt the file that I was working from while crashing. So it ended up having to go back to the previous one, losing 4, 5, 6 hours of work. And I really wish that more programs would put this autosave, relaunch, and ask you if you wanted to bring back the last stable state in this file, so that you don't lose that work.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, even
I'll plug Fusion again, which is an Autodesk product. It does that. I've never had it crash and then I come back and I can't get so close to where it crashed that the amount of work I need to do to catch up is always extremely minimal, if at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a real nice feature, because like when you're working and you're so close to being done, you're not saving every 5 minutes. I space out. I'll work 8 hours on something and realize, like, I haven't even created the folder for it yet. Like, I haven't saved anything.
Tell me if you've been here before.
No.
You're in the process of doing something, and you click a button to do some operation, and it takes more than 5 or 10 seconds to run the operation, and then all of a sudden you remember, I haven't saved for 5 hours. Holy crap!
Yeah.
In that time you're going, oh, dude, don't crash on me.
Yeah.
So
I've actually had times where it didn't crash, and for some stroke of stupidity, I just went back to work and didn't save it. My ADD or something kicked in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's running.
Yeah. So what's nice about this is it is nice to hear like I'm not the only one that has these issues. This is very reassuring.
I can say the exact same thing.
Mhm.
I've often wondered how many of these problems are just I was never properly trained, and I taught myself.
Yeah. Well, like my machine, like I put a lot of money into like I think I've got like 64 gigs of RAM. I'm running like a 1080 Ti. Like it's still that's a couple years old, but like I spent more on my graphic card than a lot of people do on their whole computer, you know?
Yeah.
And like I really tried to make that thing as friendly to doing the 3D design work as possible, and I still have issues.
You're gonna hate me when I tell you what I'm running.
Is it a Celeron? Are you running
It was built in 2013.
what was the big processor before they had the i5 and the i7 and the i9s? It wasn't the Celeron. Pentium.
Yeah,
You're running a Pentium?
I've always hated Pentium. This might be a Pentium. I'm not sure.
Wow.
AMD.
Wow. That hurts my heart.
I've always been AMD processors. Always. Just I had the Pentium 3 899 when that one first came out. Hated that processor. It's just the whole rig was completely unstable. But let's see here. This is a.
I'm not gonna front. I do a lot of my stuff on my old MacBook, and this is like a 2014. So,
Well, I mean, I'm certainly not gonna say like those you need to get a new thing. I just know like for me, I did everything I could at the time that I built this machine. I did everything I could to minimize any bogging down that the machine might do.
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
If I'm
lag.
working with larger files, and it still just doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter.
The funny thing for me is with this one, it's an i5 3.4 gig CPU, 32 gigs of RAM, and it's probably got like an old GeForce 5600 or something in it. And when I was working on the Razor Crest before that job got canceled, I had to split it up into separate sections. Like I had to do an engine and then main body and then like landing gear. I couldn't do it all at once. But I was working with 35, 40 million polygon files, and my computer wasn't bogging down.
Wow.
Impressive.
That's why I haven't. That's why I haven't put any more money into it until it starts slowing me down. There's no reason to.
Yeah, and if you keep it off the interweb, it probably won't start slowing down.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah.
It hasn't been on the internet since the last time it was formatted, and I had to download all the update files for Windows. And actually, all the update files for Windows are now just stored on my hard drive because they don't support them anymore. If I ever have to format it again, I can just. The Windows 7 runs much more stable for Maya than Windows 10 does, at least, again, in my experience. There may have been some updates that have addressed that since I tried it last, but just Windows 7 is a much more stable operating system all around. And I hated that they stopped supporting it.
Cool. All right, guys. I think we're gonna wrap up for today. George, thanks for coming and talking to us.
Yes.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah.
This was great. Thank you.
Yeah, and so we'll have another show. What is this? July
15th.
So at some point in August, we'll do another show. I'm still trying to get Mr. Cho on to talk about tank treads. So that's some point in the future. And I know there's been a lot of group chat lately. People have been talking airbrushes, and I know I chimed in with like we should just do an airbrush episode. So we may do that. So one of those two things.
If you want me to do that one too,
okay. We'll talk about it.
as I say, I'm down for that if you want me to.
Cool.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I love my airbrush.
Oh yeah.
As long as you mix the paint right, like I don't have too many problems.
As long as you clean it after you use it. That's
Yeah,
my
clean
And
it.
after you use it.
I've got a bad habit of using it and laying it down and then just, cussing myself out when I have to clean it 2 months later.
Yeah,
But
cool.
Wow.
All right, guys. Thanks again, and we'll catch you guys next time.
you guys have a good day.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thanks, George. Yo,
Thank you.
Joe.
Good to
Yo,
meet you.